physical, emotional, or verbal abuse. Abuse is perhaps the most serious red flag in any relationship, and it often begins subtly before escalating over time. Many people mistakenly believe abuse is only physical, but it actually takes many forms, each equally damaging to the victim's well-being. Physical abuse might start with seemingly minor actions like aggressive gestures or accidentally pushing, before progressing to more obvious violence. Emotional abuse often manifests through tactics like constant criticism, humiliation, or emotional blackmail. Verbal abuse includes yelling, name-calling, threats, and degrading comments that chip away at self-esteem. What makes abuse particularly dangerous is its cyclical nature. Abusers often follow periods of abuse with intense remorse and loving behavior, creating a confusing cycle that keeps victims hoping for change. This pattern, known as the cycle of abuse, can make it extremely difficult for victims to recognize their situation or leave the relationship. Many abuse victims blame themselves or make excuses for their partner's behavior. They might think, "If I were better, this wouldn't happen," or "They only act this way because they're stressed." This self-blame is often reinforced by the abuser's manipulation tactics. The effects of abuse extend far beyond the immediate moment. Victims often develop long-term psychological issues, including PTSD, depression, anxiety, and difficulty trusting others. Even after leaving an abusive relationship, these effects can persist for years without proper support and healing. Controlling behavior and excessive jealousy. While many people mistake jealousy for love or care, excessive jealousy and controlling behavior are serious warning signs of an unhealthy relationship. These behaviors stem from deep-seated insecurity and a need for power over one's partner. Controlling behavior often starts subtly, checking phone messages, questioning every social interaction, or making small demands about appearance or behavior. Over time, these small controls expand, gradually restricting the partner's freedom and autonomy. The controlling partner might use guilt, anger, or manipulation to enforce their wishes. A pathologically jealous partner might become suspicious of innocent interactions, accuse their partner of flirting or cheating without cause, or demand constant updates about their whereabouts. They might even become jealous of time spent with family members or same-sex friends. Digital surveillance creates a prison-like atmosphere of constant monitoring. A controlling partner might demand passwords, track their partner's location, monitor social media activity, or insist on immediate responses to messages. This digital surveillance creates a prison-like atmosphere of constant monitoring. The impact on the controlled partner is severe and far-reaching. They often lose their sense of self, becoming isolated and dependent on the controlling partner's approval. Their self-esteem erodes as they're forced to constantly defend normal behaviors and relationships.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
Lack of respect for boundaries. Boundary violations are often overlooked early in relationships, but represent a fundamental disregard for personal autonomy and respect. Healthy boundaries are essential for maintaining individuality and self-respect within a relationship. Boundary violations can be physical, emotional, or digital. A partner might repeatedly pressure you to do things you're uncomfortable with, share private information without permission, or ignore your requests for space or time alone. They might also dismiss your feelings when you express discomfort with their behavior, exercise that produce diseases or lead to injury, such as running a marathon. What makes boundary violations particularly insidious is how they're often minimized or disguised as love. Phrases like, "I just love you so much, I can't help myself," or "If you loved me, you wouldn't need boundaries with me," are common tactics used to justify boundary violations. The long-term effects of boundary violations include loss of self-trust, difficulty identifying and expressing needs, and increased vulnerability to manipulation. When boundaries are consistently violated, individuals often lose their sense of what healthy boundaries look like. Healthy relationships require ongoing respect for each other's boundaries, even when they change or evolve. Both partners should feel comfortable expressing their limits without fear of guilt, anger, or retaliation. Viciously and constantly, and chronic dishonesty in relationships destroys the foundation of trust necessary for healthy connection. While small white lies might seem harmless, a pattern of dishonesty indicates deeper issues with trust, respect, and emotional intimacy. Chronic liars often start with small deceptions that gradually escalate. They might lie about their whereabouts, spending habits, or relationships with others. These lies create a web of deception that becomes increasingly difficult to maintain, leading to more lies to cover previous ones. Step 3. The operational trifecta. The impact of discovering ongoing dishonesty goes beyond the specific lies told. It creates a situation where the betrayed partner begins to question everything in the relationship, including genuine truths. This psychological effect, known as truth uncertainty, can persist long after the relationship ends. Living with a dishonest partner creates constant anxiety and hypervigilance. The betrayed partner often becomes an unwilling detective in their own relationship, constantly looking for signs of deception. This dynamic destroys emotional intimacy and creates a cycle of suspicion and defense. Recovery from chronic dishonesty requires more than just promises to change. It requires understanding why the lying occurred, establishing new patterns of communication, and rebuilding trust through consistent, honest behavior over time. Gaslighting and manipulation. Gaslighting is a particularly destructive form of psychological manipulation, where the abuser makes their victim question their own reality, memory, and sanity. This subtle form of emotional abuse can be harder to identify than other red flags because it targets the victim's basic trust in their own perceptions. Take these regions, for example. The left hemispheres of the brain are connected to right brain areas. Common gaslighting tactics include denying events the victim clearly remembers, trivializing their feelings and concerns, shifting blame onto the victim, and rewriting history to favor the gaslighter's narrative. Phrases like, "That never happened," "You're too sensitive," or "You're imagining things," are classic gaslighting statements. The effects of gaslighting accumulate over time, leading victims to lose confidence in their judgment and become increasingly dependent on their manipulator's version of reality. This dependency makes it extremely difficult to recognize and escape the manipulation. Victims often experience anxiety, depression, and isolation as they struggle to maintain their grip on reality while being constantly told their perceptions are wrong. They might stop sharing their experiences with others, fearing they'll be dismissed or disbelieved. Recovery from gaslighting requires rebuilding trust in one's own perceptions and judgment, often with professional help. Many survivors report that the psychological damage persists long after the relationship ends. Refusal to communicate or resolve conflicts. Healthy communication is the lifeblood of any relationship, and a consistent refusal to engage in meaningful dialogue or conflict resolution represents a severe relationship red flag. This can manifest as stonewalling, avoiding important discussions, or responding with aggression when issues are raised. When one partner consistently refuses to communicate, it creates an emotional void where problems fester and resentment grows. This pattern often leads to what therapists call emotional gridlock, where both partners become stuck in their positions with no path forward. The silent treatment, a common form of communication refusal, is actually a form of emotional abuse. It leaves the other partner feeling invisible and powerless. Over time, this can lead to anxiety, depression, and a deep sense of emotional abandonment. The impact extends beyond the immediate relationship, affecting how both partners handle conflict in future relationships. The partner who experiences chronic communication shutdown often develops anxiety about raising issues, while the non-communicative partner may never learn healthy conflict resolution skills. Addressing this issue requires both partners to understand that healthy conflict is normal and necessary for relationship growth. Learning to communicate effectively, even during disagreements, is a crucial skill that can be developed with practice and possibly professional guidance. Financial exploitation or control. Financial abuse is often overlooked but can be just as damaging as other forms of control. It occurs when one partner uses money as a tool to gain power and maintain control over the other, creating a form of economic imprisonment that can be difficult to escape. This red flag manifests in various ways: controlling access to bank accounts, demanding detailed explanations for every purchase, forcing the partner to ask for money, or creating situations of financial dependency. Sometimes it involves more direct exploitation, like taking out credit cards in the partner's name, or forcing them to pay for everything. What makes financial control particularly dangerous is how it intertwines with practical survival needs. Victims often feel trapped because they lack the financial resources to leave. This dependency can force people to stay in toxic or abusive relationships, especially when children are involved. The psychological impact is profound. Victims often experience shame, loss of confidence, and a distorted relationship with money that can last years after the relationship ends. They might struggle with basic financial decisions or develop anxiety around spending, even on necessities. The effects ripple into future relationships where survivors might find it difficult to trust partners with financial matters, or struggle to maintain healthy financial boundaries. Recovery often requires both practical financial education and emotional healing. Substance abuse issues affecting the relationship. Substance abuse creates a destructive dynamic where the relationship becomes secondary to the addiction. It's like having a third party in the relationship, one that always takes priority, leaving both partners emotionally and often financially drained. Partners of addicts often fall into enabling behaviors, thinking they're helping but actually perpetuating the cycle of addiction. They might cover up for their partner's mistakes, make excuses for their behavior, or take on additional responsibilities to compensate for their partner's declining functionality. Codependency frequently develops, where the sober partner's entire identity becomes wrapped up in managing the addict's life and problems. Their own needs and personal growth take a backseat to the constant crisis management required by the addiction. Recovery requires both partners to acknowledge the problem and commit to change. Often, both partners need professional help, the addicted partner for their substance abuse, and the other partner to heal from the trauma and develop healthy boundaries. Lack of trust and constant suspicion. When trust breaks down in a relationship, it creates a toxic environment of constant doubt and suspicion. This can stem from past betrayals, insecurity, or projection of one's own unfaithful thoughts or behaviors onto the partner. Constant suspicion manifests in behaviors like checking of phones, social media monitoring, unexpected visits to check up on the partner, or interrogation like questioning about daily activities. These behaviors create a suffocating atmosphere where privacy becomes non-existent. The accused partner often finds themselves in an impossible position. No amount of evidence or reassurance seems sufficient to prove their faithfulness. They might begin to withdraw or modify their behavior to avoid triggering suspicion, leading to a loss of authenticity in the relationship. This dynamic creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. The suspicious behavior pushes the partner away, which is then interpreted as confirmation of unfaithfulness. The relationship becomes a cycle of accusation, defense, and growing resentment. Without intervention, this pattern typically escalates until the relationship becomes unsustainable. Recovery requires addressing the root causes of the trust issues, often with professional help, and establishing new patterns of open communication. Difficult core values and life goals. While opposites might attract initially, fundamental differences in core values and life goals often lead to irreconcilable conflicts. These differences might seem manageable in the honeymoon phase, but become increasingly problematic as the relationship progresses. Core values include attitudes toward money, family, religion, and politics. When partners have opposing views on these fundamental issues, daily life becomes a constant negotiation, and major life decisions become battlegrounds for conflict. The strain of trying to bridge these fundamental differences often leads to resentment. One or both partners might feel they're compromising too much of their essential self to maintain the relationship. This can result in a loss of personal identity or a feeling of living an inauthentic life. What makes this red flag particularly challenging is that neither partner is necessarily wrong. They simply have different visions for life. The love between partners might be genuine, but love alone cannot overcome fundamental incompatibility in life goals and values. Resolution often requires honest assessment of whether compromises are sustainable long-term, or whether both partners would be happier finding relationships more aligned with their individual values and goals. Public attorney Richard Vaux writes, in Public Disgrace, he ties up cases that so often commit. Repeated infidelity represents more than just momentary lapses in judgment. It reveals a fundamental issue with commitment, respect, and emotional maturity. Each instance of cheating creates deeper emotional wounds, and erodes the foundation of trust necessary for healthy relationships. Serial cheaters often display patterns in their behavior. They might repeatedly seek validation outside the relationship, maintain inappropriate friendships or connections with exes, or create situations that enable infidelity. They might also show a pattern of minimizing their actions or blaming their partner for their choices. The impact of repeated infidelity goes beyond the immediate betrayal. It creates complex trauma for the betrayed partner, affecting their ability to trust not only their current partner, but also future relationships. Many survivors develop anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress symptoms. Recovery from serial infidelity is particularly challenging because the pattern suggests deeper issues with intimacy and commitment. Even if the cheating partner promises to change, rebuilding trust requires significant personal growth and often professional intervention. The decision to stay with a serial cheater involves weighing the possibility of change against the risk of continued betrayal. This decision becomes more complex when children or long-term commitments are involved. Emotional unavailability. Emotional unavailability creates a one-sided relationship where genuine intimacy and connection become impossible. It's like trying to embrace a shadow. The form is there, but there's no substance to hold on to, leaving one partner emotionally starved and increasingly desperate for connection.
I don't think it's going to be better at the same time as me.
This manifests in various ways: difficulty expressing feelings, avoiding deep conversations, shutting down during emotional moments, or maintaining emotional distance even during significant life events. The emotionally unavailable partner might use work, hobbies, or other distractions to avoid emotional intimacy. What makes this red flag particularly painful is its subtle nature. The emotionally available partner often feels crazy or too needy for wanting basic emotional connection. They might be told they're too emotional, or that their needs for intimacy are unreasonable, leading to self-doubt and decreased self-worth. The impact of emotional unavailability compounds over time. The seeking partner often exhausts themselves trying to create connection, like repeatedly throwing stones into a bottomless well. They might develop anxiety, depression, or attachment issues as their emotional needs go chronically unmet. Recovery requires understanding that emotional unavailability often stems from past trauma or learned behavior patterns. Change is possible, but only if the unavailable partner recognizes the problem and commits to the uncomfortable work of developing emotional intelligence and vulnerability. Inability to take responsibility for actions. A partner who cannot take responsibility for their actions creates a relationship where growth and resolution become impossible. This red flag manifests as constant deflection, blame shifting, and an inability to genuinely apologize or acknowledge wrongdoing. These individuals often have a victim mentality, seeing themselves as constantly wronged by others while being blind to their own contributions to problems. They might use phrases like, "You made me do it, if you hadn't," or "It's not my fault that," to avoid taking responsibility for their choices and actions. The impact on the relationship is profound. Without the ability to acknowledge mistakes and take responsibility, conflicts never reach true resolution. Instead, they become circular arguments, where the responsible partner bears the emotional burden of both parties' actions. This dynamic creates a form of emotional exhaustion in the other partner, who must constantly manage both their own emotions and their partner's unwillingness to take responsibility. Over time, this leads to resentment, decreased respect, and a breakdown in emotional intimacy. The relationship becomes stuck in a pattern where real change is impossible because one partner refuses to acknowledge their role in problems. This can leave the other partner feeling like they're going crazy, as their reality is constantly denied or minimized. Isolation partner from friends and family. Social isolation is a gradual process where one partner systematically cuts off their significant other from their support network. Like a predator separating prey from the herd, this isolation makes the victim more vulnerable to manipulation and control. The isolation often begins subtly, criticizing friends and family, creating drama around social events, making the partner feel guilty for spending time with others, or insisting that we only need each other. Over time, these tactics escalate, making it increasingly difficult to maintain outside relationships. What makes this red flag particularly dangerous is how it masquerades as love and devotion. The controlling partner might frame their behavior as protective or as a sign of how special their relationship is. They might say things like, "No one understands our love," or "They're just jealous of what we have." The consequences of isolation are severe and long-lasting. Without external perspectives, the victim loses their ability to reality check their situation. They become increasingly dependent on their partner's view of the world, making it harder to recognize abuse or leave toxic situations. This isolation can persist even after the relationship ends, as many survivors find their support networks have eroded, making recovery more challenging. Rebuilding these connections becomes a crucial part of healing from the relationship.